And often the charge that we get from people is that, and as we have even outlined here, there are many problems. And there's this belief also that governments can solve all the problems. So in terms of even defining what the problem is, where to begin from with the protest, among many other things, we struggle. In your experience, dealing with the Ghanaian government, state institutions, and mobilizing people to protest, what's it generally been like in terms of having that message that we can get the very good masses to jump onto and to demand accountability the way we want?
Thank you for that question. I think it's really extremely important to, especially for to come out to protest, finding issues which can resonate with a lot of people. So for Fix the movement, you know, we're focusing on young people. So for a lot of the time, we of the rising cost of living. Like, I don't need to come and give you a list of those things. You know what those problems are. So I think that as long as when you are trying to mobilize people, if you keep people at the center of it, if you're focused on, you're speaking to individuals, finding out what their issues is, because the reality is that the issues that affect me is not the same thing affecting a young person in Budumburum, right? And or another some of the ladies over there, we have different issues. It's about ensuring that you're engaging as much people as you can, because even though
realizations I've made is that as we speak, 90% of the youth, or I should say in Ghana, at a point fear to even speak out when there are worrying issues affecting us.
Are you?
For me, I'm not a part of.
Okay.
And it's a reality I've seen out there. Most of my SRC president, most of my local NUCS presidents who lead on the various campuses, when there are genuine issues we are supposed to speak of, you get a lot of threats, a lot of victimization coming from the top management. So now various management of various schools find ways and means to creep into the whole system such that the student leaders on the various campuses just become an extension of them. Political parties in particular are also finding ways and means to get people to be leading the front. So at a point when there are genuine issues affecting the over 12.5 million Ghanaian students in this country, that at a point you are supposed to get a bold leader to speak out. At a point you don't get such individuals to speak out to represent the actual worries of the Ghanaian youth. So this is one of the key issues. So growing up in the scene, one thing I've told myself is that I have to present myself, prove to the world that indeed you carry something special. Already, when you are invited into these meetings and all that, you speak, as you rightly said, you are good in the policy draftings, you are good in the communications, you are good with all the English. You put everything together. But the thin line between what we've been able to put together and the implementation stage becomes the problem. We talk, we do everything. There's a group called the Youth Parliament, which was established by the National Youth Authority. And now we say we are not being given the represent. They are putting all these staffs, which I feel they are just ceremonial staffs. There's nothing that has been decided by the Youth Parliament that has been absorbed into our main governance. Never. There's nothing that has been said by most of our youth in this country that has been considered up there. They don't consider whatever thing we say. So when we also sit back and we feel all these ideas, you invite us for a lot of learning, getting more ideas. So when you invite me to sit here, I also push out a lot of sharp ideas to prove, indeed, the youth you are prepared. But the worrying thing is, after pushing it out there, it's not considered. Yeah. And it affects the whole process. It's what all these things you are doing of giving the youth an opportunity in there without considering our voices. So, becoming NUC's president, one thing I said to myself, regardless of the party, regardless of the affiliation, I will speak up.
Have you been speaking up?
I've organized 2 demonstrations in the country. All my advocacy yield results. I remember one time when I went to Jubilee House, when most of our students were studying outside. We sent them there to go gain knowledge and come and help the nation's development. We send these students out there, and this same government who promised them to fund them the necessary stipends, these stipends don't go. Ghanaian black students would have to go there, going through a lot of ordeal. I went to France, and you see the kind of things Ghanaian students are doing. I went to US, and I went to India recently. You see the kind of things Ghanaian students are going through, and they are all in the name of government scholarship. So I came back to my country, organized a press conference, and the next day you're having a lot of threats, a lot of calls from so-called godfathers on your phone, threatening you to cut even your political career off and all those kind of things. And I said to myself, this is the main reason why these students elected us. If you continuously stay in that place of not speaking up, we always have weak leaders. When I approach most of my NUC's president, they say those in the oath, most of the things we are seeing in our current days is as a result of the youth in those old days standing up and speaking up for certain revolution to happen. So in our current day, if you don't have certain group of people like that, and always we are complaining in our heart. In 2018, Kenya University organized a huge demonstration, which BNI is aware. And this is the results. One of the key reasons is that, you see, as we are sitting here, we have worrying issues affecting us. We always meet and we discuss it. We are not able to speak boldly about it. It's inhibited in our heart for a very long time. To get to that stage, just like NSAS and all youth in the country then gather and then protest. That's the actual black man. But it shouldn't happen so that always we would have to harbor the things within our heart and get to that stage where we don't have to come up and then protest, distract everything before these people listen to us. It is time we would have to speak up, and that is what I've been doing. I went to Jubilee House and I told them, if stipends are not paid, myself, single-handedly, I will organize more than 200,000 students to demonstrate in this country. And within 1 week, the stipends were all paid to the student. Similar thing happens with the EC. I found it quite disheartening why you are organizing or you are putting up registration staffs, and our university campuses that have most of our intellectuals who are going to lead this country in the coming days are not involved in the whole thing. I went to them, wrote to them, they never listened. I went to the media and told them, we are just giving them 3 days. If they don't involve tertiary institutions in this country in the whole process, in a way of disenfranchising us from participating in the elections, we will come out. Within 24 hours, they opened it up. So at a point, they want us to be speaking. And it shouldn't always be so that we always have to protest before they listen to us. We should be able to set up systems. And that is what the National Union of Ghana students. Maybe when I leave, or we might not get other people who want to do same. One of the last things I wanted to do before I leave office, because I'll be leaving soon, is how the youth should be involved in the main decision-making body. Because I went to the ministry and I told the minister that when you get to the council, the Ministry of Education's council, there's no youth, no young person we should have NUCs even represented there, who would directly represent the minds of young people. We don't have anybody there. We just have the professors and the doctors who are represented there. Get to Ghana AIDS Commission, which is dealing with youth in this country. You have no youth representative. Get to most of these organizations. And I spoke with other NGOs as well, and we were able to set up a youth council. So as you see, Ministry of Education has a youth council representative as a result of our advocacy. As we speak, the youth council is putting up a whole curriculum because we feel there's a hitch in the senior high schools. Now, get to most of the senior high schools. Almost every senior high school student there can't even speak up. So we should be able to set a youth curriculum. Soon it will be included in the GES curriculum. That we are going to empower the students. We are going to pull the values of this country into these students to be very confident, like those days where BNI Dems were able to speak up when there are wrong issues in the country. Yeah. When Kwame Nkrumah Dems were able to speak up. Else it will continuously be talk. We'll come up with all these ideas, sharp ones, and it ends in this particular room.
I see Mr. President is very animated about this one. We'll come back to him because there's a lot more accountability that we'll have to demand from him, because he's representing over 12 million, right? Yeah, so much more than I was thinking. But let me go to Agya. Even though Agya is no more with the Youth Employment Agency, you're going to have to bear it and help us out here. So with everything that we are hearing, it seems pretty obvious that, again, if you look at the numbers, if you look at the unemployment rate in a country like Ghana, among other things, what is it? Is it that the political class especially sort of understand the problem in the way that we have talked about it here? There are moments that will go to them, say whatever it is, threaten them and get some things done. But in terms of the structural changes that would deal with the problem of unemployment, with the problem of general deprivation, among many other things, there's not much really that comes at the end of the day. So from where you sat at YEA, how huge really was the problem?
I'm sure if I had a wholesome answer to that question, I'll be the most important person in Ghana now. But then I will attempt and share some few perspectives. Generally, sort of trying to reconcile the thoughts that's been shared by my co-panelists. I think that I sincerely believe that the problem is much bigger than we think it is. We have discussions, and the political class has always been easy targets. Everything is the politicians. Yes, they have to be blamed because they came to us to be voted for. But I think it's a general systemic problem. When our NUX president was speaking, you realized he referenced the fact that you have leaders in schools that are afraid to speak up. And I think it's a cultural thing where, starting right from the home, that attitude, that culture is not really imbibed in us to be able to speak up when we find something wrong or something doesn't serve our interest. And that's been going on. And so what we are having, this shift we are having where young persons have the platform to express their concerns, who want to have a voice, is very important, and it's something that we should encourage. When Isaac told me to come, I told him I wasn't going to because I've been part of quite a lot of these discussions for the last 5 to 6 years of my time in office, and most of the discussions you come and that's it. So I asked him to assure me what is going to happen after we have these discussions, and he was able to present to me a framework that keeps the conversation going, and I think that's what we need to do. That has been the Ghanaian problem. We are very interested in short-term fixes, right? And so when my friend was talking, she talked about defining the problem. And I think that's what we've been missing also as a country, where we think we know what the problem is. We are not a learning nation. So I had a conversation with someone in a different country, and he presented me documents one document from the UK was called the Bilderberg Report that discussed issues of welfare, youth unemployment, issues of benefits, building a working society and what have you, as far back as 1947. And this document has been implemented and revised. You talk to a lot of young people and they tell you that, oh, politics, I can't do politics.
Yeah.
I don't want to get my hands dirty, it's too dirty. And I tell them that you will keep sitting in your houses and whining because you don't want to, in quote, get your hands dirty. Because you get the wrong sort of people being involved in it and getting the work done. See, the challenges that we are confronted with is going to take a lot of tough work to be able to deal with it, to be able to solve it. And so if as young people we are not ready to put ourselves out there, we'll never fix it, because we can't let someone tell our story.
Yeah.
No one is going to solve our problems for us. We hope that government will, and government will do it. Government is taking steps. But it is easier when you have young people at the table telling you that it is this and not that. You have to push this button and not that button. Till we are able to get quite a lot of young representation in governance, it is going to be very difficult. And I think that is why platforms like this is very good to nurture such voices.
Yeah. I want to go back to Felicity on this, because there's an element of inclusivity that is emerging here as a result of what Agya is saying right now. I'll have that same question addressed by Obianuju as well. But in the way that you understand things here in Ghana and perhaps even across other African countries, I suppose it's not as easy as we say, because our politics, for instance, is so monetized in a way that even though it's not written out there that you are excluded, but you essentially have very little room to operate. Can you address that for me? Maybe even for women, even for persons with disability, among others, because I know you are also quite strong on affirmative action.
Okay, so yes, absolutely. The reality is that for culturally, he touched on that, but I want to touch on it again. Culturally, we are conditioned that the adult is always right. We have to give reverence to older people, to people in positions of authority. So by virtue of that, that also means that the child is always wrong. So the younger person is always wrong. And that also means that the younger person is disrespected. And so their views do not matter. What they think does not matter. And actually their welfare does not matter ultimately. And if we don't address this cultural problem, and we don't fight back against the very idea that the adult is always right, we say no, the adult is not always right. If the adults were right, Ghana would not be so wrong. So we cannot in any way look at Ghana and say, oh, the adult is always right, and it's happening in our homes. So if you're treating your children in this way, you're being brought up in that way, these children are not going to grow up and suddenly become assertive, suddenly become the people who speak up. And the adults who they're also dealing with in the workplaces, in government or whatever, are not going to suddenly start respecting young people and seeing them as people who have valuable things to add. Yeah. So that they just think you don't matter. You don't matter. What you think does not matter. You know, we're very keen on, then what do you know? Yeah. You know, we're very much like that. And in terms of the exclusion, the reality is that the political space and even spaces where decisions are being made, because one of the things I actually wanted to ask him was, in your workplace, in terms of like your board at YEA, how many people, and I think it's very interesting that we keep talking about youth and we're talking about people in their 30s, right? What about 18-year-olds? What about 19-year-olds? What about 20-year-olds? Because even within that space, again, we're letting the older people within that space dominate it. So I'm, saying I'm a young person, but I'm 34. I'm not that young. Like, I am not. Like, I can't relate what's happening in an 18-year-old's life. I don't know what her issues are, their issues are. So even within the spaces where we're saying, oh, we're doing inclusion, we're not really doing inclusion. And then there's real barriers of entry. So if you don't, for example, if you don't align yourself politically, generally, what table would you be at to where decisions are being made, right? If you're not in a political party, and within the political party, then there's the whole hierarchy there as well. And then if you want to run for office, how expensive it is to run for office, how these are real barriers to people entering those spaces. And, you know, disabled people, no, in Ghana, let's be honest, like we don't even, it's almost as if they're invisible. They're not included in the conversations. Who cares? Like our general interaction with disabled people for a lot of people is, seeing them in traffic or whatever, but we don't see them as people who have something to add, as voices that need to be heard, as people who have to make a contribution, who need to be included. We do not see them in that way. We don't treat them in that way. So I think it's so easy to sit back and say, what are young people doing? And they could speak up more. Yes, young people should speak up more. Yes, young people should protest more. I think NOX should do more protests. I want to see more protests. I'm actually even surprised you're saying they've organized protests. I wasn't aware. Actually, I genuinely wasn't aware. And I can't speak for everybody here, but how many of you knew that NOX has had protests? And this is you guys as young people. So it's just, I'm just wondering. It's a question, right? So we need to be, I think we need to be more intentional about bringing more people in. But even when you're in, how much can you do? Like, and the political class are not going to get away, they're not going to be able to shy away from this and be like, but what is the civil society, what's the civil service doing? Because the reality is that even if the civil service person does their job, the CEO doesn't agree with it, it's not happening. And the CEO is appointed by the government, and the budget, even if the CEO agrees and the budget is not approved of, it's not happening. So at the end of the day, the buck still stops with the people at the top. They're the ones who ensure things happen. So when things don't happen, ultimately they need to be held responsible.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll go to Obianuju here, and I just want to perhaps also get from you, based on your own experience, what you have learned from NSAS, engaging with the leadership in Nigeria. Would you have any suggestions, ideas, lessons, recommendations for governments across our continent in terms of how to get more young people in, more persons with disability in, more women in, because they are disproportionately disenfranchised in this. Any thoughts on that, Obianuju? I mean, I call you queen, but today it's...
I think that the way to do that is just to do it, because we keep on saying, how can we get more women involved? How can we get young people involved? How can we get people with disability involved? By doing that, by actually just doing it, it's not mark of democracy. People are saying that they want you to listen to them. They are expressing themselves. That is one of the ways that we want to be involved, because you've refused to actively allow us to be involved through the easier channels, right? So for me, what I learned from NSAS protest was that as young people, we had some mistakes that we also made, and this is evident in the fact that when we did the NSAS protest, it was kind of elitist. We organized using social media, great and fine, but only about but protest or advocacy on the street is not the best way to get things done. It is great and fine. I love it. I think that it is essential because it puts government on their toes. But I also feel like we should come back from putting people at risk, because you see that governments across Africa, their reaction to protests led by young people is violence. They kill us, they arrest us, they maim us, they disappear us, and that's traumatic for someone like me that survived NSAS protest. I live with survivor's guilt, knowing that people were out there protesting with banners that had my names on it, my family, my brother's name on it, and they died because of that. I wouldn't want that anymore. What would I want? I would want a situation where I can push for policies to be changed. But I can only do that from the inside, like they say. So I have to organize, I have to get in there. What we need is a policy change that allows for young people to actually participate in politics. And this can only be done when people understand that political power is not their birthright. They must leave it. They must let go of it for young people.
Okay, I think
They need to leave it. And they need to understand that when you create party, when you mentor people, you'll be able to get these people.
in Ghana. And Bello, I just want to quickly get your thoughts here because we're trying to get to understand this a bit more from the broad Pan-African sense. Because we see these protests cut across the African continent. How are you reading these protests that we have seen from Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa before, and many other places? And why are governments behaving the way they are behaving in terms of even violence and the way that they are killing protesters, among many other things like that?
Well, I think, first of all, we have a political class that profit from the current status quo. We have a political class that has failed to think outside the box. We have two stark options here. In the early days of independence, whilst we embark on import substitution, right, the Asians went for export-oriented development. And we saw the end result. Whilst we failed, Asians succeeded. But they did one thing. They revolted against IMF. We have a political class that would create a chaos economically and run to IMF. And they come, they tell us to fasten our belt whilst they're losing theirs. As we stand today, Nigerians are hungry. Tinubu is going to buy a new presidential jet. So if I look at it from my perspective, we have a generation that is cut out from my world. I always say it, if I have a second chance to be alive, I'll choose Jupiter over Africa. They failed us completely. And you see, we've tried neoliberal economic policies for getting to 3 decades. They have failed. So why do you keep on recycling the problem?
Yeah.
We are treating the symptoms, and not the ailment itself. What NSAS did was to take away that screen of fear. And if you look at it, it's just moving east and west. Now we have two options to choose as young people rather. We either go the Sahel way, where is a military revolt, or we take the Senegalese option, take our destiny into our hands, But if you look at it, let's look at the specifics now. In Kenya, it's a protest against the status quo. They went into an election where the sitting vice president was technically the opposition candidate, William Ruto, right? And then Odinga, in opposition, was the government candidate. But Kenya has been ruled by two dynasties, the Oginga and the Uhuru dynasty. So Ruto represented a protest against a political dynasty. He chose to align himself with the status quo. And that's how come you see the protests unabated. We come to NSAS. It is actually against police brutality. That is the symptom. But the main problem of that was an absence of governance. In Nigeria, the government is practically not there. Because if people can just be kidnapped and they vanish all of a sudden and we only come, police as what you call redeploy, reinforce, the work of the police is to prevent. So you look at across the continent, you have two worlds whereby the youth, our problem today is bread and butter, right? Those who can change the situation are the policy makers. But if you are quick to go to IMF and you come to tell me that, we have a problem, you haven't admitted how we got to that problem itself. Mm-hmm. You mismanage the economy, let's call a spade a spade. And you come back to tell me to fasten my belt, you're losing yours. Be grateful if I choose to demonstrate without violence.
That's a very interesting one, Bello. And I want to stay with you here in the crowd and to take some questions and engagements from you. Especially as we have talked about Nigeria a lot. I see a lot of Nigerians around you. And so it would be very interesting to know what you guys think. I'm not going to force mention anybody, but I would appreciate if you, yeah, okay, so I'm directed to Taufik. Yeah, Taufik, tell us something.
Oh, okay. Well, first, I'm actually quite excited that our NSAS protest made this much impression on so many people on the continent, because I didn't know, it was this big. Because to be honest, if you ask a lot of Nigerians, they felt NSAS was a lost cause. Because aside, of course, we had like some progress with regards to, SARS was disbanded, but it came at a very, very high cost. There was so many killings, and we still don't have so many questions answered till this day. So many Nigerians will tell you, well, like that time was bad, like we didn't achieve anything. So it's kind of interesting to see that so many people across the continent are actually referring to that protest, and it's serving as like some sort of like example, to talk about like protests in other countries. So that's something a lot of Nigerians will actually want to listen to, and they'll be very, very glad. Aside that, we also had, protests a couple of weeks ago, which was in a very different dimension from NSAS protests. Because NSAS, obviously, just like he said, it started as police brutality, but obviously it was more of like governance, the very bad nature of how the government had run, the economy at the time and society at large. So we also had something like that too now. Because when we had this new government, they took some drastic decisions, right? We have this fuel subsidy thing. Yeah. It was off. They took it off, and now we buy like fuel for like X8 the price that we used to buy. We had, they introduced this student loan thing. Yeah. So meaning a lot of subsidies that students used to like enjoy, everything, off the table. At the same time, we saw like the budget, and it was, lavish spending for the president. Yeah. We have a new jet now, Airbus. So we're like new customers for like the aviation industry now. We saw like the president also wanted to like procure like a yacht. Yeah. And yeah, like, we have a water line. So, we are by the coast, so we need a yacht.
You guys move different.
So, a couple of things like that. There was this particular building that our vice president uses in Lagos. The capital is in Abuja, and we were renovating this house in Lagos. Like, bro, you don't stay there. Like, why are you renovating it for 20 billion? You don't even stay there. Like, this guy doesn't stay there at all. Like, he doesn't stay there. And you're renovating the house. You get, so the protest was very large, and, of course, you had obvious, response from the government was like very tight, and it kind of died down now. Yeah. But obviously, the interests are still like picking up, from other sectors of like Nigeria, because Nigeria is actually very big, and if you're not there, you won't understand. It's very complex. Yeah. To Northerner, for example, NSAS doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's not their business. Yeah. But now it's their business. Yeah. Because now there's not cheap fuel anymore. Yeah. The inflation is crazy. Right? So, but for them, they didn't think police brutality is a thing, because they were like suffering from a lot of like security issues that they felt like police presence was actually needed. Yeah. Right? So they felt like we were just dancing around in the South. Mm-hmm. But now they're protesting. So there are so many perspectives to how we see these things, very well, in Nigeria, and the kind of conversations that we have. And I see it across Africa as well, in Kenya, everywhere. Yeah. Right? So in terms of government, it's still the same problems. Just like he said, symptoms, no solutions coming up, and it's just like the tone deaf thing. Like in Nigeria, it's the tone deaf one.
It's just depressing, Like, I mean, it looks like we can always go on and on and on. It's really depressing. And if I could just take one brief comment from, and I would most likely love it for our colleagues from here. Is there anyone who wants to jump in very quickly and say something? Are you sure? Very well, no problem. Thank you. I want to bring it back here and try and wrap up on this conversation. It's become customary. The way we do these things is that when we talk about the problems like that, on our way out to try and see, even though we appreciate that these are complex, if we can drop some bullet ideas in terms of also how the team that is taking this forward can push it out there. So maybe, Agya, I want to start with you on this one. Again, now you are out of YEA. You obviously saw a lot of things. Now that you are out, well, what do you think we should do?
Right. I'll discuss maybe 5 points.
be a bit brief? Yeah,
just,
so that,
just
yeah,
very
thank you.
brief points. Definitely, we need to change the structure of our economy. My friend did talk about it very clearly, that discussions around import substitution and exports, and look at the structure of our economy. Almost 90% of the things we consume in this country are imported. What that means is that for every day, you have a huge majority of your population dropping your currency and changing it to buy things into the country. So it's very important that we need to have discussions around that. Two, in terms of protest, yes, there are different kind of protests, but we need to clearly, as young people, use all the avenues that are available to us. And that is why I indicated the point that it is not just about being on the streets, but pushing papers and making sure that we are being represented. Look at the Senegal issue. I mean, if you, and maybe historians can tell us, I've not followed Senegalese politics for long, but I'm sure in terms of the analysis, it was so far off for the young man who became president to ever be president, because the barriers that exist across the sub-region are almost everywhere. We need to be very courageous to be able to deal with the issues. It's not going to just vanish or just move a wand and it's gone. The other issue that I want to also discuss is that as young persons, our minds, we are very used to the status quo. I think we are very comfortable. We are very comfortable. I think you look around and look at even and this is my personal opinion, I can be very wrong. Look at the nature of protest that was being done. At some point, it was almost for people to come, take pass very funny comments that sort of devalues the sort of high interest and the importance of the things that were being discussed. We need to put up a serious face, and we need to present an alternative. Till we present those alternatives, it becomes very difficult. We'll almost be protesting in vain, right? And I think one issue that we also need to be pushing forward is have discussions around the change, some amendments to our constitution. It's very important. And I think if there's anything that I want to be known for from this discussion, is that we need to really advocate for some changes in our constitution. Because for me, it doesn't make sense that for someone in my village in Edum in Kumasi to be relying on someone from Accra for road constructions and development, when governance can be brought closer to the doorsteps of people. Yes, there's conversations around elections of MMDCs, but I think that we can go a step further. It is not just about electing them, but making sure that MMDs, as our metropolitan, municipal, and district assemblies, are able to raise funding and fund their own development. These are also very key items that we need to discuss. In terms of youth unemployment, it's a big issue. We are sitting on a time bomb. And that's the whole youth bulge situation that we are talking about, that you have quite a huge chunk of your population sitting at home. And so it's a national security threat. How do we engage young persons? There's discussions around the skills mismatch that needs to be addressed, changing of our curriculum, making sure that young persons receive pre-employment services is very, very important. And most importantly, as young persons, to be able to be taken seriously, we also need to take ourselves seriously, make the investments that we need to make in ourselves for organizations to start becoming learning organizations, civil organizations, pushing papers, doing the research, putting out the alternative for the whole world to see. I think Ghanaians are very forward-looking, but I don't think we've been presented with the best alternatives yet. And so that is why we are still stuck with the status quo. So till we get that, I think we would still be having...
I know I said that we are running because of the time, but I also know that you are contributing to the manifesto drafting of one of the biggest political parties, I mean the ruling government. That also means that if they are retained, we should expect for some of the things that you have contributed to, for instance, to be manifest. Is there anything exciting there for you?
Yes, it's quite exciting to be part of drafting I was part of the Youth and Sports subcommittee. And we were able to push our ideas. Young persons
do you think, for instance, that has been prepared already? Do you think, for instance, that they are listening to people like you, such that if this government is retained and I see the next 4 years, how things go on youth employment, among other things, when I meet you somewhere, I can point to you as one of the guys who contributed to this, but they didn't amount to anything. Do you think they are listening to you?
I believe it lays, what we did was whatever we brought forth was
Yeah.
taken into consideration,
Okay.
and it's very well reflected in there. But for me, most important, they are more interested in building the foundations.
Okay.
For me, it's always been the old man who wants to plant a palm nut tree,
Yeah.
and the grandson telling him that, grandfather, you won't be here to see this tree grow, but then he says that he's doing it for future generations.
So the
And so
foundations.
for me, that's the most important.
Yeah.
There are key issues in this country that we need to address.
Okay.
Yes, some of them we need to tweak some few things, but then more of them are long term. And my fear is that a lot of the solutions that are being proffered are
Yeah.
not long term. They are very short term fixes, the symptoms, and then we are not
The-
dealing with the
the root
main
cause.
issues till we tackle that.
Yeah.
And that is where I want all of us to be looking at, trying to understand what the problem is.
Okay.
Understanding the problem and testing out solutions to see which one works best. But of course,